Hello and welcome to the show today. I'm really glad you could join us. So today we're talking about something really important, getting money. We're actually going to talk about a really cool way to do it through fundraising, especially for nonprofits, because this is one of the biggest things that we see a lot of nonprofits struggle with is that they can't access the capital they actually need to do so. And we're going to talk about how to do it digitally, which is perfect in a post-COVID world where we can actually see that you can use your efforts online to digitally be able to get the money you need really for any business, but especially for nonprofits. So with us today is Tim Kachuriak. Now, Tim is the founder and chief innovation and optimization officer for NextAfter, a fundraising research lab, consultancy, and training institute that works with charities, nonprofit, and NGOs to help them grow their resource capability. Now, nonprofit thought leader, Tim is the author of the book, Optimize Your Fundraising, lead researcher and co-author of the Online Fundraising Scorecard, Why Should I Give to You?, the Nonprofit Value Proposition Index Study, and the Midlevel Donor Crisis. Now, Tim has trained organizations in fundraising optimization around the world and is a frequent speaker at international nonprofit organizations as well and conferences. He's also the co-founder and board member for the Human Coalition, a member of the board of director for Open Doors USA, an advisory board member for the SMU Digital Accelerator, and an advisory board member of the Blackbaud Institute for Philanthropic Impact. Tim, there's a lot of words in there that I struggle
We'll get
there. Welcome to the show, man.
Awesome, Ty. Thanks for having me, man. This is going to be fun.
Well, I'm really glad that you're here. We've never really covered this type of topic before. So let's talk about this. First of all, fundraising can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So
Correct.
When we talk about fundraising, especially for nonprofits, what are we really talking about?
Well, what you have to realize is that the nonprofit industry is like a $452 billion a year industry. That's how much money was given from individuals to nonprofits in 2019. So it's a lot bigger. When I tell people I work with nonprofits, they're like, "Oh, that's cute." I'm like, "Yeah, it's a pretty big space." So all of these organizations have to figure out how they're going to be able to fund their causes. And that's where fundraising really comes into play. Now, most traditional forms of fundraising involve things like face-to-face. You go meet with somebody, sit down, have coffee, you tell them about your charity and what you're doing, and then you ask them to give you a certain sum of money, and hopefully they do it. You can also fundraise through direct mail, digital, which is what I focus on, radio, TV. So it's kind of like any other industry. I mean, there are lots of different ways to be able to go and take your product to market.
So what do nonprofits struggle with in this? Because I excuse my language, they suck. I mean, honestly, I see so many nonprofits completely suck at this. And that's one of the things I want to do. Like my goal of when I retire is I want to work with nonprofits to help them market because they suck. They're bad at it. So why are nonprofits so bad at this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one that we've been exploring for the last, I guess, decade or so. So the company that I started, NextAfter, it's a fundraising research lab and a consultancy. And when I say fundraising research lab, we have been trying to figure out how can we help nonprofit organizations to be more effective at taking their message to the people that would be their likely ideal donors. And so we've studied this in great detail. One of the things that we found is that nonprofit organizations have a very difficult time articulating their value proposition. So when I say value proposition, really, how do they answer the question that every single donor needs to hear the answer to, but they rarely verbalize, which is this: if I am the ideal donor, why should I give to you, to your charity, rather than some other organization or not at all? That's a question that they have to anticipate and be able to effectively answer at every stage of kind of like the donor customer life cycle. And the reality is what you've suggested is they're not doing a good job.
So what do you think they're doing wrong that commonly that you see that could be done a lot better?
Well, so we did a study about 4 or 5 years ago where we actually went to 127 different nonprofit organizations, very large organizations, national organizations, and we asked them that value proposition question. So we contacted them via the phone, we contacted them on social media, we sent them an email, and then we looked at what their website had to say. And when we asked them the question, why should I give to you? What we found is that number one, a third of organizations never got back to us. So the first thing is just basic blocking and tackling customer service. When somebody asks you a question, especially like a donor intent question, you respond to them. But then the second thing we found is that like their answers were very inconsistent, right? So as you like explored the answers that they gave via the phone or via like the email or what their website had to say, they were saying different things in different areas. So I think consistency more than anything else is probably one of the things that could be really improved upon.
So you think that it sounds like a lot of the problem is story. They're just not good at storytelling, which is what's interesting because I have one of my friends owns a nonprofit. She has a really great cause. I mean, she helps kids like from the worst situations. And what's interesting is that once in a very great while, she'll actually run a video or a story of one of those kids. And it's so powerful. But then she doesn't do that very often. It's like she doesn't understand that it's that story and that messaging that pulls on people's heartstrings. So is that where it's off? Is they just don't really understand the power of good storytelling?
I don't know if that's necessarily it, honestly. I think it's related to just clarity of messaging, right? So like most nonprofit organizations, they have 100% clarity on what they do, but like what you do, your mission is not necessarily what makes people want to give. It points to things like story, like, you know, here's the impact that you can receive as a donor in exchange for your gift. I mean, that's ultimately the product that they have to be able to sell. So it just comes down to really clarity around what it is that is their unique value proposition. That's the challenge.
So that makes perfect sense. Well, you guys have a lab. So what do you do? What's the importance you think of research, of experimentation? What does that help you do with improving fix or basically helping fix this problem?
Yeah. So we do two kinds of research in our lab. The first kind is what I refer to as more forensic research. So we're going out and analyzing large amounts of data across the nonprofit sector. And what we're looking for in the data is patterns that lead to opportunities to really unlock greater digital fundraising performance. So we're hyper focused around digital. We believe, like many, that it's the future of fundraising, but it's still an underdeveloped opportunity. So the challenge we've run into is that the kind of data we're most interested in analyzing either doesn't exist or it's not readily accessible. And that's because what we're most interested in is trying to experience the nonprofit, the charity, from the donor's point of view. And so we found the best way to get that perspective is by becoming donors ourselves. So basically what we do is we'll go out there about 4 or 5 times a year and we'll launch one of these major mystery donor studies. We'll go subscribe to hundreds of different organizations at the same time. We'll monitor everything they send us. We'll wait for them to ask us to give a donation, and then we'll respond by giving an online donation as small as $20, as large as $5,000. And then we continue to monitor how they communicate with us once we've crossed from being a casual visitor to subscriber to donor. And it's fascinating because we get to see like the entire like donor life cycle. We get to participate in that as a donor. And what we find is that there's so many different ways that organizations communicate and relate to their folks that are their supporters. And it's wildly varying from organization to organization. So that gives us a lot of really interesting insights. But every time we do one of those studies, what invariably happens is that we'll have 2 organizations that are very similar in terms of their size, their scope, their area of focus, and they've got 2 radically different communication practices. So when we see that, we say, okay, if organization A is doing one thing and organization B is doing something else, how do we know what works best? So we take a lot of the insights that we glean from the mystery donor studies and we use it to power the other kind of research we do, which is applied research, where we're basically using the web as not just a channel, but as a platform, a laboratory where we can run experiments and test this versus this and see what works and what doesn't work. So that's where it gets really, really exciting, where the rubber meets the road, because you're able to go take these 2 different ideas, these 2 different concepts to market of real live potential donors and see who responds.
Well, what does that data help you do?
Well, it's helped us like basically like debunk a lot of the so-called best practices about what works and what doesn't. I'll give you one quick example. So if you look at most nonprofit emails that they send, and many people don't realize this, but like email is the #1 source for most nonprofits' digital revenue. So like it comes from direct response email. But if you look at their email appeals that they send out, they're very highly designed, lots of images, lots of graphics, big clickable buttons. I mean, the copy sounds like it's written from a professional copywriter because it usually in fact is, right? And so it's when a potential donor sees that in their inbox, they just see somebody trying to market to them. And like what we find is that people don't want to be marketed to, they want to be communicated with. Fundraising happens in the context of a relationship, and a relationship happens between two people. So what we've tested is taking like the highly designed email, getting rid of all the HTML, getting rid of all the images, the graphics, the buttons, and actually writing it as more of like a plain text email. And when we've tested that head to head in an A/B split test, we find that increases results, like actually fundraising results 300-400% in some cases.
Wow.
So just simple things like that just really kind of go against what your intuition might tell you are some of the things that we're learning in our lab.
In your lab, what is some of the things you found out of some of the best places to actually go to acquire donors?
I mean, right now, probably the most accessible place for every nonprofit organization is through Facebook advertising. And the reason why is because Facebook enables you to highly target your message to people that would be your likely ideal donors. And if you already have existing donors, you can create lookalike audiences and run ads. And the reason why this is so efficient and so accessible to so many nonprofits is that you don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to do it. You could go and like spend $50 and run some targeted ads to people that would be likely donors, and hopefully get some solid responses from that. So it's a great place for folks to get new donors.
What kind of ads have you, if any, have you tested or found work really well in that space?
Yeah. So a lot of people focus and gravitate towards like trying to make ads that are really beautiful and that are really eye-catching, and all that stuff is great. But what actually works is ads that have more copy, that have more words, that actually like make the person stop and have to read, right? Because what we find oftentimes is like reading is one of the ways that the potential donor can understand what the organization does, what their cause is, why it's important, and more specifically, how they can get involved with their financial gift. So we find that actually text outperforms images in many cases.
Have you got to the root of why people give? And is that something you're kind of able to help these organizations figure out?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that people give for different reasons. Some people give out of a sense of guilt. Like I have so much, and so I feel guilty for that. Some people give out of compassion, right? Some people give out of anger, frustration. They want to see this change happen in the world. And if this organization can go make it happen, they're going to give. And that giving comes from like this visceral kind of, frustration or response. So the challenge is that everybody gives for slightly different reasons. And that's what makes it so difficult to create kind of like the optimized ideal, one size fits all donor application. And that's why you really have to focus on how do we tailor our messages? How do we tailor our offers? How do we tailor the donor experience to different people that have these different ingoing motivations?
What do you do to help these nonprofits? It sounds like you plug in, you look at their data, you help them kind of better understand who's giving them money, why they're giving them money, what works with the access points of getting money from those people. And then what do you do from there to help somebody really establish a strategic plan moving forward?
Well, one of the first things that we typically do is about a 12-week engagement where we get all of their data. So you're absolutely right. So like every organization, I mean, this is true for for-profits too, right? Every organization has multiple independent data silos, right? We've got web analytic data, we've got email data, we've got social data, we've got CRM data, and usually none of that data talks to each other. So the first step is getting all that data together in one place and kind of getting a clear picture as to what your reality is. Where are all the pockets of opportunity to optimize performance? And then the next step is understanding that when you're looking at data, what you're really observing is human behavior. So then we flip over to the user experience side. We start to step through all of their websites, their emails, their landing pages, their campaigns. And we're looking for places, we're trying to marry up what we're seeing in the data with what's happening at that stage of the digital donor journey. And then the last thing that we do is we assess like the value proposition. As I mentioned, that's a huge thing that really moves the needle. And then we put together a 3-year strategic plan. And the strategic plan has a schedule of key initiatives. They're prioritized by strategic area of focus, estimated time to complete, cost to complete. We do an exhaustive revenue pro forma for each. And then we put together what we call a design of experiments, because what we believe, testing is super critical, not just to unlock greater performance and results, but also unlock learnings about who your donors are, what they care about, and what ultimately makes them to respond. So that's kind of the process we go through.
Now, you guys tout digital first strategies for what you do.
Mm-hmm.
What are digital first strategies?
Well, it really relates to donor acquisition. So most nonprofit organizations have built their donor base through direct mail. And direct mail is great. It's an incredibly powerful medium. It works. I know that everybody like complains about how much junk mail they get, but the reason why they keep sending it is because it works. But the problem is that if you want to get the most valuable donor, you need to find donors that are least willing and able to give one gift online and one gift offline. And those are what we call our multi-channel donors. And the reason why those are so valuable is because multi-channel donors, they retain at a much higher rate, right? So they stick around year after year after year. And they also have a higher average annual donor value. So when you combine those two factors, like they're huge, they are definitely the most valuable segment of donor. But if you look at the data and you look at like offline acquired donors, so like donors that come in through direct mail, or online acquired donors, donors that come in through digital, the migration path to multi-channel is much, much higher for online acquired versus offline acquired. So when we talk about digital first, it's about shifting the focus and really the budget from putting all of the chips into the direct mail pile for acquisition and moving some of those over into the digital pile. And what we've seen is on average, when we've analyzed like hundreds of organizations, 209% on average, higher conversion rate to multi-channel for digitally acquired donors versus offline acquired.
Wow. So if that being the case, do you really even see the reason to diversify an online and offline, or is somebody just better off to move all their offline spend online?
No, I would not say that that's true, because if you think about the average age of most donors, the most valuable donors are kind of the boomers and above, right? That doesn't mean that they're not online. They're actually very much online, and they're actually online in droves. They consume more online content than any other generation. But it's really about creating like the right mix between digital and traditional direct mail that really leads to the most valuable donor.
Talk a lot about acquiring a donor, but what do you do when you well let's start there. I mean, when we run Facebook ads, we run a lead magnet, an ad that runs to a guide of some sort, and then into an email sequence, and then emails to convert. What does it look like in your world? Are they running an ad to a lead magnet to bring them in and do it through email? How's that funnel look?
Yeah, our most successful clients do exactly that, right? So they'll start with some type of free content offer, and that could be like sign this petition. It could be download this ebook. It could be take this free online course, right? Whatever that thing is. And what we find is actually the amount of time that the potential donor spends with that initial offer actually is predictive of what their conversion rate is to customer, or in our case, donor. So for example, a petition takes like maybe a minute to read through and sign, but our conversion rate to donor is the lowest for a petition signer. An ebook, which may consume, maybe, 45 minutes to an hour and a half, 2 hours of their time, has a much higher conversion rate than a petition. And then if we offer somebody an online course that's like 7 weeks and they get access to all this content, the conversion rate to donor almost like triples what it was for the ebook downloader. So it's about kind of like creating like the most effective type of offer that's going to lead to the most highest converting donor. Not everyone can do the online course thing, but if they can, it's obviously preferred.
Yeah. Well, what about upgrading? Have you found, what do you think when they get people in the funnel, what's the best way to actually, before we even talk about upgrading to more, what are you finding they're doing to then be able to get money from those potential donors?
Yeah, there's different paths to take. So one of the things that a lot of really smart nonprofits do is they do data overlays, and they try to identify donors that have very high capacity. So these are people that are wealthier. They've got lots of assets. They may have higher household incomes, and they may take those particular donors, even though they may have just given an initial gift of $25 or $50. And they'll put them on a different kind of path, right? And this path is going to lead to more higher level asks to try to get that donor to give like a mid-level gift of say 1,000 to 10,000, or a major gift of 10,000 or more. But as it relates to just the general direct response file, it's about giving them more catalytic opportunities throughout the year to give to support the cause. So I mean, that's really how you maximize lifetime value with the broad-based donors.
What about upgrading? Are you able to help them kind of upgrade and get more money from a potential donor than they typically would?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the one of the simple things that we've tested is really working on the value proposition. So here's what's kind of cool, Ty, and this is what I think is actually really separates nonprofits from like for-profits. And it's the simple fact that we don't have a fixed price, right? If you think about it, right? Our customer determines the price. Our donors decide how much they're going to give. And what they use to make that decision is how impactful their gift is going to be in terms of, making impact on the cost. So the more that I can get that donor to understand the value proposition and why their gift is going to make a huge impact, not only does that influence greater conversion, meaning more people giving, but also how much they give in terms of, gift amount. So that's one of the things that we spend a lot of time working on. I mean, there's other tactical things we could do with like gift arrays, changing the different numbers of options that we give people, like you give 10 or 25 or 50. We do things like trying to get people to move towards recurring giving so that they get locked into like giving $20 every single month, which actually increases their donor value. But those are more tactical things, but really the value proposition is the strategic.
What have you found on retaining them? Have you found strategies with all that you guys do research wise to figure out the best ways to retain donors once they actually give, to get them to give more and ongoing?
Yeah. So one of the problems, especially with like any sort of mass marketing, and it's especially true with mass fundraising, is that you begin to look at your donor as an ATM machine, right? And so their only value to you is what they give to you. And so you treat them like that. And we use terms like, let's go send an email blast, right? Let's go and target these people. I mean, like we use words like that really dehumanize the relationship. But if giving happens in the context of relationship, if people give to people, then one of the things we have to really work on is ways to really love on our donors. So that's one of the things we work hard with our clients on, is really trying to build that relationship by not always asking, but actually giving and giving back to the donors more. And when I say that, I mean giving them, things that represent significant value.
What do you think when you are working with a client? What's some of your general advice of somebody that's a nonprofit, of just basic things they can do now to optimize their strategies what are the fastest, easiest things they can really do to optimize their strategies and see better results?
Number one, put a higher focus on email acquisition. So, and what I mean by that is like lead generation. So the number one predictive indicator of any nonprofit organization's ability to raise money online is the size and quality of their email file. So if they're not putting any sort of focus or investment or effort around email acquisition, they're missing an opportunity. Number two, removing friction and things that actually make it difficult for donors to give. So if you go to a nonprofit's website and you have to click through this long, laborious process to actually complete your gift, that's adding tremendous friction to the process. It's slowing people down, and that is ultimately like killing your donation. So remove friction. And then third, and I know I sound like a broken record, but like really focus on getting clarity around what is my value proposition? How do I communicate it appropriately to every single donor across every single stage of the donor journey? So those three things.
So Tim, as we get ready to wrap up, what's some of your best advice? Maybe what I didn't ask and should have asked, that for anybody watching, especially that's a nonprofit that's really struggling this, because you and I both know, man, this is not a good time. When the economy changes, people get crazy. They try to hoard their money. It's probably a lot of nonprofits are struggling right now to be able to get the funds they need. What's some of your best advice that maybe we haven't covered to help them?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, 2020 surprisingly was one of like the larger years, especially in digital fundraising. And so, I mean, I think that, the one thing that everybody should really be thinking about if they have a nonprofit organization is how can I lean more into digital? I mean, this is the time of digital, with this whole kind of like world being thrown into this digital transformation because of, work from home and, quarantine and all the things that have been associated with the last year. And for folks that lived in Texas, I guess we called it Snowvid or, Snowmageddon, that kind of locks us in place. But like just really leaning into the opportunity that's presented through digital. Nonprofits typically have older clientele. Their donors are typically older, and those folks are on Facebook in droves. So like lean into that, figure out ways to kind of reach out to folks that might fit that ideal demographic through some of these digital channels. You might be surprised.
Where can everybody go to learn more?
Probably the best place is our website at nextafter.com. I mean, we've got a whole wealth of free resources there for nonprofits. We've developed a whole series of different certification programs for people that really want to go deep. And you can get access to all of our old conferences and other webinars and things there.
Cool. Tim, thanks for coming on with us today.
Awesome, Ty. Thank you.
So listen, especially if you're a nonprofit, if you don't know a nonprofit, then make sure you turn on to this episode. If you are a nonprofit, then this makes brilliant sense. I mean, this is the first time I've ever heard of somebody that has a lab, and what they do is research to find the best ways for you to be able to really get to know who your donors are, know them, understand them, build relationships with them. Let's be honest, that's what's important. I think for everything Tim said today, that's the problem. Start treating like a number and somebody that's just a bank, and treat them like a person. And when you could do that and get to that right messaging to the right person, which digital makes it way easier, way cheaper to do, then your ability to raise funds at a significant level higher than what you have with less effort is greatly increased. So if you want to learn more, go to nextafter.com. A lot of great information right here on the website. You can also click with them to let them help and talk to them more about what they can do, and have them run their own analytics and what they do with your database, your donors, give you some advice specifically on your industry and what could work for you, because this is the difference between helping some people and helping a lot more people. It all comes down with really understanding the micro level that they understand. So make sure that you check nextafter.com to learn more and to be able to boost your fundraising revenue. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.